Welcome back. If you haven't seen my videos before, I'm Ross the Oliver Man, and today hopefully we're going to start getting the 4180 reassembled. If you remember from the last video, we had some lube pump problems on the back end, and it is quite difficult to get to what we have to get to in order to fix it. And in the comments of that last video, there were tons of questions about these articulated tractors, and a lot of people wanted to know whether this was the same procedure for a 4150 and all kinds of things like that, and it is not. The 4150 and the 4180 are two very different animals, and so I might as well explain some of that while we're here. If you look at these two tractors, they look very similar, with the exception of that there is the outboard planetaries on the 4180. Essentially, if you want to think about the two tractors, the 4150 is basically two 105 rear ends, and the 4180 is two 2255 rear ends. But the 4180 has had a lot of changes made into it, I would assume based on problems that they found with the 4150, because you understand that the 4150 was the first silver tractor, and the 4180 came along later. So I think they applied what they were having problems with to this one, and that is why it is a totally different animal. So on the 4150, it's the same motor essentially, but it has a 3-speed hydraulic shift, just like your regular row crop tractors would. And so that being said, when it leaves the hydraulic shift, it's spinning the same way that it would on the row crop tractors, but it goes into the back side of the rear end, because the front rear end is turned around. So your back is towards the engine and the front is towards the articulation joint. So I assume what they did on the 4150 was they just basically hooked it up where the engine is driving the rear end in the same direction, but since the rear end is flipped around backwards, it is turning backwards inside. And at first thought, you think, well, that's going to screw everything up. Well, no, it's not, because since the rear end is turned around and now you're driving from the back side of it, your 6 gears will move you forward and your reverses will move you backwards. If you turned this rear end in the same direction, you know, that it would have on the row crop tractor, in other words, like from the other end, then this tractor would move backwards. It'd only have 2 forward gears and 6 gears in reverse. So that's really the thing. On the 4150, it was pretty well just the same rear ends as the row crop tractors. Very little modification. They just hooked two together. The problem, somebody told me they found out with the 4150, was that by doing this, it was putting a lot of thrust on the smaller bearing of the pinion shaft, I guess, and it was causing them some trouble. So they changed that on the 4180, but the 4150 was basically just two row crop tractors put together, but the front rear end was turned around backwards. And then, okay, it's turning that rear end backwards, but by the time it comes up here, it is turning this in the same direction as the engine, you see. So that makes this rear end go forward correctly, because the front rear end's flipped around. So they didn't have to do anything inside really like they did to this one, and I'll explain that in a minute. So on your 4150, your lube pump for your transmissions are just like the row crop tractors, I believe. They fit in that machine place and have the spring pin, and everything's just fine, and you don't have the trouble like I had on this tractor. So the difference, I hope this makes sense, because there's it's a lot of thinking to understand how this is going. But on the 4180, we have the same engine, but it is coupled to a 2-speed high and low, and it's gear to gear only. You cannot shift on the go. It's just a 2-speed gearbox, and when you shift you have to stop. You can't be moving or it'll grind gears just like another transmission. However, unlike the hydraulic shift, or the power comes out of this 2-speed, it is going in the opposite direction, reverse direction of your normal row crop tractors. And also another thing about the 2-speed is on the back of it is the lube pump for the front rear end. So your transmission lube pump on this one is on the back of this 2-speed unit out in the open, out here where you can get, you know, it's not inside. And then so it's leaving here and it's turning in the opposite direction of the engine. And this is where you're going to really have to kind of follow along here and put this together in your mind, because you can really confuse yourself if you're thinking about this. So it is turning from the back side of the front rear end, like we talked about a minute ago. This is a rear end that's pointed that way, so this would be the rear. It's turning from the rear, but it's turning at the opposite direction. So because it is turning from the rear and turning at the opposite direction, the ring gear has to be flipped over in this one in order to get your 6 speeds to go forward of what you had. Otherwise everything would go backwards and you'd have six reverse gears and only 2 forward gears. So it leaves here spinning opposite direction, turns from the back side of this rear end, turning the opposite direction. So it's got to have the ring gear flipped over. They put the lube pump out there. Then when it leaves here, the bottom drive shaft is the drive shaft that does your ground travel, and the upper drive shaft is your power takeoff and hydraulics. So because that shaft is hollow up through here, just like on the normal row crop tractors, it can turn at the correct rotation because it's going into the engine. So that doesn't change anything with your hydraulic system there. But in the front rear end, I believe that you would actually have the 2 shafts would be turning opposite directions of each other. The one inside going one way and the outer transmission going the other way. But that's doesn't really matter. That's just something to think about. But the ground drive one's the one we're concerned about. So it is going in, spinning the opposite direction, spinning this transmission backwards, but it's got the ring gear flipped over so that the tractor's going the correct direction forward and reverse. It leaves this transmission and goes into this rear half, which, like I said, is essentially a 2255 rear half, except now because it's spinning backwards of what it normally would be, they had to flip the ring gear on this one, and that is why there is no room for the lube pump in this half of the tractor. You see, the ring gear would normally be over here, and now it's over here, and the lube pump on the row crop tractors would go there. And it's interesting, if I get my light, you can even see they machined the hole like the normal lube pump would be. I hope you can see that. I'm not very good at doing everything at once, but that's interesting that they took the time to machine that hole. So I assume that it probably was part of a machine that probably did all 3 of these, like the 2 bearing bores or something. Maybe that's why that happened, because it seems wasteful to do that if you weren't even going to use it. But anyway, that is where your normal lube pump would sit, but you can't do that now because your chain would interfere here on the ring gear. So they had to move it over here and down in this pocket. And my thought was, why in the world would they not have put it up here, you know, where there was nothing? But I guess you would have to worry about possibly it not getting enough prime because it would be a little bit higher maybe. I don't know. I thought maybe they'd worried that the chain wouldn't get enough lube being up higher, you know, because things are splashing it with oil down there a lot better. But they didn't do that. They put it down in that pocket. And so what I did here to put it back in was no easy task. I ground on this housing. And I'm going to get a couple shots here of it, I hope, so you can tell. I'll put them side by side of the first video shots. And you can tell how much I actually ground off of this housing. I ground quite a bit. I probably have like 6 hours in grinding. And it really it helped to get it in there easier, but you still couldn't get it in there with the gear on. I had to assemble it with the gear down in there, so that's still not ideal. You can see the 90-degree pickup screen down in this little trough there. See, normally your pickup tube on your lube pump would come straight down, and it would be above that drain plug hole. And then your plug would have a screen made on it that goes over that tube so that you can pull the plug and then, you know, clean your screen and whatever. And this one, you can't do that. It's down in there, and the only way to get to it is if you do what I did and take this all apart. So this is where we are now. It is not mounted in there permanently because I have to put the lube pump chain on and then shim the pump up to get the correct tightness of the chain, because on this one you can tension the chain by putting shims between the pump and the wall of the rear end casting. And I was lucky enough to find another original continuous lube pump chain. It was not available from AGCO, but I found a new old stock one, so that's going in there instead of the kind that could fall apart. Now, in order to do that, I have to take out the power takeoff shaft, drive shaft. On your row crop tractors, the shaft would come in, you know, like you pull it out the back of the PTO, but it would go from here all the way up to the engine and go in the back of the flywheel. But on the articulated tractors, you have the articulation joint with drive shaft. So essentially your shaft has to stop before then, and it stops right in here. It's a short shaft that goes, I don't know if you can see, but it goes through here, and then it goes up to the front of this transmission, and then that's where it stops. So it's a lot shorter than the ones in your row crop tractors. And being out in the open, it should be pretty easy to get it out of here. You know, usually you have to, people have trouble getting it slid back in or slid out because you have a set of splines here, you have a set of splines in here, and then you would have the set of splines up at the motor, in this case the front of the transmission. So there's 3 sets of splines that have to all line up in order for you to pull the shaft out, and that's why it can be difficult sometimes to get everything to line up. But I think that's the point we're at, is putting the chain on. Like I said, I ground for I don't know how long, and then, as you might imagine, even with taking precautions and stuffing rags and things down in there, it still had a lot of grinding in there that I needed to clean up. So I flushed this out with diesel fuel multiple times, and then I used brake clean, and I've used a magnet and went down in and picked up everything, you know, till my magnet didn't pick up any more metal shavings. And I think that we're in good shape. So I think, like I said, I think we're ready to put the lube pump down in there for keeps. We just have to get the shaft out of the power takeoff so that we can get the chain on here, and then we're good to go. And then of course all we have to do is clean up our gasket surfaces, which I got this one, I got the gasket scraped off, but I still want to clean it better. And then we need to take the metal plate off of the bottom of that hydraulic unit, clean that up so that gasket's ready to go, set it all back together, and then hopefully it's just a matter of hooking up some lines and whatnot, and we'll be ready to go, and we'll have a 4180 again. Well, a new exciting thing that I've never done before is I broke both legs of the snap ring off. So now I got an irremovable snap ring that I'm gonna have to try to pick out of there. Boy, that's gonna be a thrill and a lot of fun. Nothing to grab a hold of. I don't even see where the edge is of it. There it is. There's the, it's still there. Still there. Well, I think it could be there. Well, that is very interesting. So now I need to go get more tools because I'm never going to get it like this. That is ridiculous. Some of you were worried in the last video that you didn't hear any barn animals. Well, here you go. Mother... Son of a... piece of... Okay. After hunting together some picks and different things, I finally got the snap ring out by breaking it into pieces. Because once the outer tabs were gone, there really wasn't much else I could do. So luckily, that is over with now. And we can move on to removing this plug that's back in there. And for that, of course, we need a 1/2 inch bolt. I usually use a piece of 1/2 inch all thread I have made with a handle on it, but I can't find that right now, so we'll just go with this. Can we pull it out? Probably not. Probably have to use a pry bar or a screwdriver. Might as well try that. I'm sure it's not going to come out. Just some prying. Should get it out of there. If I can get a good bite. Or not. We're probably past the point that it's going to work. And we're not to the point where it'll pull out by hand yet. Let's see here. How to get better leverage. There, like that. Shoot it right out past you. That's pretty neat. I don't think I've ever done that before. Let's see. I gotta remember how this goes. Well, normally you would have to thread a rod in the end of the shaft and pull it out. But for luck, we have the top off the transmission. Oh, I remember what's going on. You can't take this shaft out this way. You have to do something different. It's snap ringed in up further. Ah. Well, this is not a pleasant thing that's about to happen. Okay, so there's a couple more things to note here of problems that we're going to have. I actually forgot. You cannot take this shaft out the normal way like you would on a row crop tractor. It actually is held in by a snap ring up farther front, I believe. And I'm not sure I'm not sure which way I want to go. Do I want to just pull the power takeoff unit off and do it that way? Or do I want to try to take the shaft out? Because we did find a piece of PTO brake, but I got to thinking that may not have come off of this power takeoff unit. It might have come off of the one before that was in here, because I swapped to a dual speed PTO unit. So I'm wondering what I want to do. That's another thing I have to decide now, that I've wasted all that time pulling that snap ring out the back, which it had rusty liquid in there, so I guess it was good that I took it apart. But I don't know now. What do I want to do? What's the easiest way? I don't think I have ever taken the snap ring off of this, and I don't know, without looking in the book, if I can get to it by... I just don't know how much I'd have to take loose there to do it. I almost think it'd be easier, since I already got it pretty well stripped down, to just go ahead and pull that power takeoff unit out of the back. Boy, I really hate to do that, but maybe it would be a blessing, because maybe I can clean out this housing one more time a little bit better. a couple things I want to point out about this housing while we got it this far. I don't think I said a while ago. One of my first thoughts when I couldn't get that out was it'll drop down under this ring gear here assembly, and I thought, well, maybe I can just snake it out to this open area and grab it. Well, you can't, because if you look in there, there's all kinds of raised places of casting, and it just wouldn't work. There was no way to get it pulled out of there without hitting something. The other thing to note is, like this area that I ground on, I really don't see a big deal for grinding on it there, because you're not using this area on this tractor. On your row crop tractor, inside of there and over here on this side is where your shift rails, the back half, would go through. So on a row crop tractor, I don't think you'd want to grind into that, but on here, this is just a solid chunk of cast on the opposite side of where I was grinding. So there really wasn't any danger of getting into anything. And hopefully it's not, I don't think it really weakened it in any way. I did take off some material, but I don't think I did enough to really hurt it too bad. So I guess we're at a standstill again for this video, because I might as well just probably pull that PTO unit off. I'll read the service book and see what it says, how hard it is to get this snap ring off this shaft, but I'm thinking that probably go a lot quicker to just pull the PTO unit off than to try to work underneath of this piece here where your drive shafts go into, because you'd have to work back under here. I don't know. It's always something. This 4180 is such a different animal. It just doesn't play nice. It's a totally unique situation in a lot of ways. It's not like the other tractors. So I suppose that's probably where I'm headed, is just pulling the power takeoff unit off, all so that I can slide the chain over this shaft. That's all I have to be able to do. So we got to take it all the way off just for that. But something has to happen here. I mean, I remember now when I took and swapped these PTO units that I knew all this. I read up on this. This has been a long time ago when I did that. And I just left this shaft in here and slid the power takeoff unit on it. And so I do remember that now. That's kind of a pain, but I think the right thing to do is probably to pull the power takeoff unit off, so I can for sure clean under in there and make sure I got everything cleaned out. And then we'll get the lube pump mounted like it's supposed to be. Probably go ahead and slap the top back on it, and then we'll put the PTO unit on at the end. I don't know what's the way. Maybe I want to put the PTO unit, I don't know. We'll figure it out. But unfortunately, this is not going to be the video where it gets put back together. This is just going to be more of the same headaches, where we find something that we didn't expect and have to keep going farther. So either way, even if I had to, I guess taking that plug out wasn't wasted effort, because, you know, if I take the PTO unit off, I don't know. I would have had to done that anyway on a regular tractor if I took that off, I guess is what I'm saying. So it's not really wasted effort. And if I took the snap ring off the front end, I'd have to have that plug out anyway to slide the shaft backwards. So either way, I think I'm over this for today. So I guess this is probably where we'll call it quits. At least I made some progress. I got the top cleaned up, and so we're on the way. It's just taking a little longer than I'd hoped. Well, as always, if you enjoy my videos, go ahead and give them a thumbs up. That really helps me out. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, so you don't miss the next part of this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.